Good morning. As we continue reading, today we look at John chapter 2. And this is the early beginning of Jesus' ministry. And John, the second chapter, starts out on the third day. So it's early in Jesus' ministry. And I'm not sure just how John counts the days, but it's early. And yesterday, at the end of chapter 1, it says that Jesus and his disciples went to Galilee. And today, on the third day, they are at a wedding festival in Cana of Galilee. This is the first of the 7 signs of Jesus, and I have that written in the margin of my Bible, and John tells us that in verse 11, after the fact. But Jesus and his disciples and Jesus' mother are at this wedding, most likely a family affair. And a wedding then wasn't just a one-day deal. And today weddings are most of the time, for a lot of people, 2 days anyway, because you get together the day before for rehearsal and the groom's dinner and everything, and then the next day is the wedding and all of the festivities, and oftentimes we might stay the third day for wedding gifts opening and different things that way. But in Jesus' day, they didn't have all of these fancy wedding venues that we have now, or places to stay. It was hosted, either the bridegroom or the woman's house or someone. It was a family affair, and the family provided for everybody that was there. And if they ran out of something, it was an embarrassment. So when they ran out of wine, it was an embarrassment. And Jesus' mom says to him, they got no wine. Just a statement. And Jesus' response, what has that to do with me? And she doesn't really listen to her son there. She just turns to the servants and says, do what he tells you to do. And there were all of these jars. It says there were six jars, stone jars for the Jewish rites of purification. So these were water jugs. And this is one of the things that Jesus and his disciples are called out on by the Pharisees, because they aren't following the proper purification rules and stuff. They aren't doing proper washing. And so these water jugs were there for making sure that people were clean, not having your hands washed because they were dirty, but the ritual cleansing. And Jesus just, he says to the servants to go fill them with water. And then just draw some out, and that becomes the best wine that they've tasted and they've had there. And it says, this was the first of his signs in Galilee, and it revealed his glory. And the end of verse 11 says, and his disciples believed in him. These disciples, I don't know. I mean, we haven't heard the calling of all 12 disciples yet. There are a few. And since it's very early in Jesus' ministry, most likely were just, these few disciples, but they were with him, and they began to believe in Jesus. After the wedding, it says, then he went to Capernaum, and this is where he basically kind of made his home grounds for much of his time of ministry. And he went with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and he was there for a few days. And then the Passover comes. And so they go to Jerusalem. And this is the first Passover now that Jesus will be in Jerusalem. And in John's gospel, it's really different than the other 3 gospels, because at this first Passover, when Jesus, just early in his ministry, he had, it was on the third day he went to the wedding at Cana, and he was in Capernaum for a few days, and then they go to the Passover was near. So it's, very early in the ministry time. And it is in John's gospel now that Jesus makes the whip of cords. He drives the people out, of the money changers out. He tips the tables over, and he cleanses the temple. In the other 3 gospels, this is done during Holy Week, after the triumphal entry into Jerusalem and everything. So John changes things up on us, and it is. I mean, the other 3 gospels are very similar. But John's gospel is written in a totally different manner than the others, and many things are in different timings. So here we have it, at the very beginning of his ministry, and it says the Jews asked, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And then he talks about destroying the temple and everything. And I want to look at verse 23 because it says, "When he was in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, many believed in his name because they saw the signs that he was doing." So we have, John showing us the first sign, the turning the water into wine at the wedding at Cana. And there will be 6 more signs that we will see in the Gospel of John. But, John tells us that Jesus was doing many more signs during this time of the very first Passover that he spends in Jerusalem as an adult when he has begun his ministry. I mean, he had been in Jerusalem for Passovers before. We know that because Luke tells us about, how he was at 12 years old, he was there. But it was a regular occurrence for Jesus to spend Passover in Jerusalem. But now it was different. Now he had begun his ministry. He had begun to fulfill the destiny that God had planned for him. And it says that, they believed because they saw the signs that he was doing. And John's gospel ends with "Now these are written that you may come to believe and know that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God." He indeed did many more signs and many more things, that are not written in this book. John says it would take too much. There's not hardly enough paper in the world to write about all that Jesus did. And I think about that, with what Jesus did, because so often, it'll say that Jesus healed all who were brought to him, or he healed many that day, and they brought to him the next day. And it just, you wonder how many people. I said that before. I wonder how many people were impacted by Jesus. And here, right here, John starts out, and I don't know if I've ever really focused on this part before, but many believed because they saw the signs he was doing. These people in Jerusalem at the Passover, maybe there were a few of them, his mom and his brothers and his disciples knew that he had changed the water into wine at Cana, and maybe they said a little bit about that while he was doing other things. I don't know for sure what all he was doing in Cana, but in Jerusalem at the time of Passover. But people were seeing and were beginning to believe and to know and to trust in Jesus. But this chapter ends with a little bit of a surprising twist, I think, in some ways. Because after that, it says, they believed in the signs he was doing, but Jesus, on his part, would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. And he needed no one to testify to anyone. So it's just interesting. He knew all people. He wouldn't entrust himself to them because he knew all people. And the very last bit, for he himself knew what was in everyone. For he himself knew what was in everyone. I think that is so interesting. And it's just, I just underlined that this morning. And that, he would not entrust himself to them. He didn't. He knew what was in them. So he knew that even though they were seeing the signs and starting to believe that it wasn't going to continue, that they were going to turn away, that they were going to turn on him. He knew, that so that it says he wouldn't entrust himself to them. He didn't. If he had really entrusted himself to them, he would have said, "I am the Messiah. I am the promised one." Maybe. What do you think? This is one of the things that I kind of wonder about. When it says, he did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. He knew, and how many times have you had somebody turn on you? Somebody that, you thought you could trust, and then all of a sudden, things happen. And I think this is part of Jesus in knowing all things about all people. And so when we talk about, God being all-knowing, being present everywhere, this is what John is telling us, that Jesus knows what's in our hearts. Jesus knows what's in our minds. Jesus knows the ones who are going to be faithful, the ones who will trust and believe and walk the walk and live the life that he instructs us to live that way. And I just, just some interesting things that happen so early in Jesus' ministry, and the different twist that John puts on it as we look at John's gospel. Because here it is, chapter 2, verses 13 through 20, that he cleanses the temple and does, causes this ruckus there. Whereas it's in Matthew 21, Mark 11, and Luke 19, toward the end of all of those other gospels. So John turns things around a little bit. And John tells us things that the other gospels don't tell us in some ways. And, John's insight seems to be a little bit different. And I think that's good. Each of us has a little bit of different insight into different things. We think different things. And that's good. If we all had exactly the same ideas, it would be a pretty boring world. But John tells us that Jesus has just done a marvelous sign in Cana, and he's doing many other signs in Jerusalem. But the Jews have asked, what sign are you going to show us for doing this? What sign? What sign? And this is, the Pharisees and others continually want a sign. They want more. They want more from Jesus. And I wonder how many people in today's world are the very same. They want more from God, more from Jesus. And we've got enough. We've got enough. We've got his love, his grace, his promise. We've got enough. We don't need more from God because we are truly blessed. May you live in that blessing today.